If you look at a render and your eye goes straight to the subject, that means it's a good render. Your visual weight is working. But what happens after that? The eye lands, looks around for half a second, finds nothing else to do, and leaves. The image had a destination, but no journey. That's the difference between a render that people glance at and one they actually stay inside. What you're missing is visual flow. And that is what today's video is about. If you have not seen the visual weight video, I'll link it right up. That one covers how you make the eye land where you want. This one picks up from there, because weight and flow are two halves of the same thing. Weight is the anchor, flow is the path. So what actually is visual flow? It's the route that a viewer's eye travels through your image after it enters. And here's the important thing. The route is not random. Your brain constantly is scanning for structure, for direction, for the next thing to look at. And if you have not built a path for it to follow, it will wander. It'll get frustrated and it'll give up. A well-composed image does not just have a focal point, it has a sequence. The eye enters, travels somewhere, then somewhere else, and then ideally loops back. The viewer might spend 3 seconds in your image instead of half a second, and that difference is completely invisible to them. They just feel like the image is rich and interesting. They don't know why. Your job is to engineer that path on purpose. The most powerful tool you have for this is leading lines, and it's probably the one that you've already heard of. But most people think of leading lines as literal lines, roads, corridors, fences. And yes, those do work, but that's just the surface level version. A leading line is anything in your image that has a direction. It does not have to be a line at all. The edge of a shadow could be a leading line. The angle of a character's arm could be a leading line. A row of lights getting smaller in the distance could also be a leading line. Even the direction a character is looking could also be a leading line. Your eye automatically follows the gaze of any subject in an image. It's a reflex. If someone in your scene is looking to the left, the viewer's eye goes left. If they're looking towards something, the viewer wants to see what they're looking at. So leading lines fall into two categories. Explicit ones, which are actual visible lines in the scene, and implied ones, which are directions suggested by the shapes, angles, and gaze. Both work, and the most powerful compositions use both at the same time layered on top of each other, all pointing towards the same place. Now here's something that most people never think about. The angle of a line changes what it does to the viewer emotionally and physically. Horizontal lines feel stable, calm, settled. A flat horizon, a sleeping figure, a surface stretching across the frame. The eye moves along them easily without any urgency. Horizontal lines do not drive the viewer anywhere fast. They invite the eyes to rest. Vertical lines feel strong and still. A standing figure, a tall building, a tree. The eye moves up and down, but vertical lines do not create forward momentum through a scene. They mark a position more than they create a journey. Diagonal lines are completely different. They create energy, movement, tension. Where a line cuts across the frame at an angle, the eye follows it with urgency. This is why a corridor shot with converging perspective lines is so much more engaging than a flat frontal shot of the same corridor. The diagonals are pulling you through the space. The sci-fi corridor example from the visual weight video works perfectly because of this. The walls converging towards a vanishing point are creating diagonal leading lines whether you place them there intentionally or not. This is worth designing around deliberately. If your scene feels static and flat, look at the angles. If everything in the frame is horizontal or perfectly vertical, nothing is moving the eye through the image. Add one strong diagonal and watch how much more dynamic the whole thing becomes. The next tool is gaze direction and pointing. This is the most human version of a leading line. The brain is wired to follow where other people look. It's a survival instinct that goes back a very long time. If someone near you suddenly looks in a direction, you look there too. That response is automatic and completely involuntary. In your renders, any subject with a visible gaze direction is doing this to your viewer. If a character is facing forward and looking at the camera, the viewer's eye stays on the face. There's nowhere to go, but if that character is turned slightly and looking towards something else in the scene, the viewer's eye will follow. You have just created a visual arrow using nothing but a head rotation. This also works with objects that imply direction without having eyes. A car pointing left is a leading line. A gun aimed at something is a leading line. A falling object could be a leading line. Anything that implies motion or intent in a direction will pull the eye in that direction. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get mentioned enough when people discuss flow, and that is repetition. When the same element appears more than once in a scene, the eye connects them. It draws an invisible line between them. And if repeated elements are arranged in a sequence that moves across the frame, the eye follows that sequence automatically. This could be a row of streetlights, a series of arches, repeated color accents at different points in the frame, even a consistent warm highlight appearing on three different objects in different parts of the scene. The eye connects them and travels between them without being told to. This is why a consistent color accent is so powerful for flow. If your main subject has a warm orange light and there's a smaller orange glow somewhere else in the frame, the eye will visit both. You've just created a path using color repetition. The viewer does not see this trick, but they just feel like the image has depth and detail that's worth exploring. Here's where it all connects back to visual weight, and this is the part that I think is really worth locking into. Visual weight tells you where the eye lands first. Visual flow tells you where it goes after that. And if these two things are not working together, you get a broken experience. The most common version of this is a scene that has a clear focal point but no exit path. The eye lands, looks around the subject, finds no leading lines or directional cues pointing anywhere, and just leaves. The image had an entry point but no interior. What you want is a weight anchor that acts as the entry point, and then at least one directional element that leads the eye away from that anchor towards something else, and ideally, something that eventually brings the eye back around. A loop is more satisfying than a dead end. The viewer feels like they explored something rather than just glanced at it. In practice, this can be as simple as a shadow edge that leads from the subject towards a secondary element in the background, or a character's gaze pointing towards a detail on the other side of the frame, or maybe even a diagonal line that cuts from the focal point towards a corner. These don't have to be dramatic, they just have to be there. One last thing. There are two ways in which a composition can fail at flow. The first is having no path at all, which is what we've been talking about so long. The second is actually having too many competing paths. If your scene has four different strong leading lines, all pulling in different directions at equal strength, the eye doesn't know which one to follow. It picks one, gets pulled, then gets interrupted by another, then another. It's just disorienting. The image feels chaotic even if each individual element looks fine. Flow requires hierarchy. There should be one dominant path that takes priority, and any secondary paths should either support it or come after it. The viewer should be able to travel through your image in a clear sequence: entry, journey, rest, maybe a secondary look, and out. When that sequence works, people don't notice it. They just feel like the image is exceptionally well made and they're not quite sure why. And that shift from accidentally placing things to deliberately engineering the path your viewer takes through the image is the entire point of this video. Because once you do it consciously, you will never look at your composition the same way again. In a future video, I do want to go through composition rules, rules of thirds, triangles, the golden ratio, and more importantly, when to actually use each one and why. If that sounds useful, subscribe because those videos are all coming out soon. Until then, thank you so much for watching, keep creating, and don't forget to stay creative.